Greetings and welcome to the other side of the story. So my name is Kenny Green and this is my friend and colleague Sam Raphael, and we are venturing into a new arena, a new way of communicating to the Dominican public and to the Caribbean public and to the world.
Right.
So Sam, can we start to talk about what we're doing now?
Please. Hi guys, I'm Sam. We're sitting here in Jungle Bay today. It may be someplace else tomorrow and the following day. And Kenny and I embarked on a journey together with this program in terms of public education, public information. We're both Dominican business people, and we've had a long-standing friendship and relationship, but we have a keen interest in educating the public and elevating the discourse, the discussion, making it more civil, more content, with an eye towards improving things on the island. And so we started to interview a number of people and have discussions on the radio, very interactive. But now, after 6 months or so, we decided to take a reflection, see what we're doing well, see where there are opportunities for improvement. And this is where we are. So it's an imperfect place we're in. We are asking our audience to work with us as we go forward. We don't want to get too stagnant and too set in our ways. So we always want to be the new thing, to introduce the new way of communicating and doing things. So now we have this podcast we're launching, Kenny, and I'm delighted. I know you're much more polished on these things than I am, so maybe you can run with it. And
well, I've never had a podcast, so
so there you go.
So I can't say I'm more polished.
But you're a more tech guy.
Well, yes, that part I can admit to. Some of the questions I know that have been asked since we've decided to take that path is why. The first question is why. We really value the outreach that we've been able to make. We've made a significant impact, I think, already. One of the changes that we've embarked on already is when you go onto the Facebook page, you'll see a pretty nuanced change. It says the other side of the story.
We were just the other side before.
Yes.
Now of the story.
Correct. Because rather than making it an assumed notion that it is what that means, which is what it was, we are making sure that people understand that it is really about presenting another viewpoint. And that's one of the things that we want to encourage. That's what's gotten us popular, that people now are getting to hear another side, even if they may disagree, that they're getting to hear it and are able to discuss it and be able to think about it, and that's very important. The other reason is we only have, especially on our booked broadcasting time on Q95, we only have an hour and a half. And because of this, and because of the calls in particular, which take up around half an hour of that time, we're really pressed for time. And many times we have to discuss something, and before we even get into the flow of it, we've got to break up the show. With the calls, which often divert into other areas.
What's your idea of the calls? Because I have mixed feelings on that. On the one hand, the interaction is good. In real time, people are listening. This is sort of touch their nerve, or this is of interest to them. So we get the responses, and it's good in storytelling that you have, an interactive audience. The church choir or the church will say amen when they agree with the pastor or the priest, and that will give them energy to even go further. So that's sort of our amen corner, or in our case,
abuse corner.
Abuse corner, or we don't agree with what you're saying, or in Dominica, when you don't agree with someone, what they're saying, you say they're lying, and so. But it's interaction and it's good. But now we're saying we have to still find a way as we go through the podcast to take on board the questions that some of these folks have, which you and I probably in our world, we don't see that way, or we may not, automatically figure these things out. And we do get some very good challenges from the audience that make us think, and I think that's a good thing. So whereas a lot of the calls, in my estimation, don't add value because they're just opinions without any content. And unfortunately, now we've come to an opinion without content world almost, where everyone's got an opinion, whether you know anything about the facts or not. And almost all opinions are viewed almost as equally when they're not. You have people that really know what they're talking about and can add value to a conversation. And you have a lot of other people who opine on every topic you can imagine with actually no foundation or knowledge of anything. And the public is left to just try to decipher what makes sense, what's real, and so on. So this is where I think, I'm relying on you. You're more a media tech guy to kind of provide guidance with respect to that. How do we keep the good and move forward with where we don't take on the calls and things like that don't add value? How do you respond to that?
Well, quite frankly, we're back in time in Dominica. What we're doing here has been moved on from pretty much everywhere else. The whole idea of a podcast is not new. And if you look at a lot of the content that's being derived in the US, in the UK, in Europe, even in Asia, it's where you have content, syndicated content, which gets generated and gets listened to by an audience based on interest areas. So this really is a current affairs podcast, which is going to target on the Caribbean and Dominican. What we've had, and quite frankly, one of the main issues that we're going to confront with this podcast is that you've got a number of people who want to be able to come in and discuss things properly, matters properly, not just from our shows. I mean, we have some really exciting proposed guests. We have an American congressperson lined up. We've got someone in the regional policy making area lined up as well.
We've got lots of people, talent that want to tell the story.
Correct. And we, at the end of the day, the value of the podcast is going to be not how it is being received just by one segment of the audience, but how it travels. Because people will take this content, people will play it somewhere else, and they'll listen to the entirety of it. And we must protect the integrity of the content. It doesn't mean that we won't get feedback. The way the platform is going to be devised, we're going to have multiple entry points, YouTube, Facebook, etc. as it develops, and people be able to ask questions both in the moment for specific topics that are coming ahead, and also to give feedback in retrospect.
Right.
So that's going to be important to us, but what's more important is that we make sure that the content is both relevant and Sam, if we produce any area of discussion, it's going to be talked about for the entire week.
Right.
And not just that, it's going to be drilled into, and people are going to ask follow-up questions and make follow-up comments that we may have to address in the future.
Correct.
I think that's a good thing. And the listenership that we have right now, as I said, there's some people who tune in just to see us fall flat on our faces, and there are people who tune in to see and to hear exactly what we have to say on a particular issue. But there's a third segment, which is what we're going to be bringing in, is that there are people who want to contribute.
Right. And
they don't want to be part of a environment that's going to be a push and pull. They want to sit with us, they want to discuss
in a more professional environment.
In a professional environment.
Setting,
And when we're bringing on heavy hitters, we need to make sure that the environment is conducive for them to be able to open up.
Kenny, maybe this is our first podcast. You just, articulated. We are, this is a current events podcast, Dominica in particular, and Caribbean regional current events podcast. So that is what we are. And our name is the other side of the story, because we're probably going to bring some unique angles, and we're going to dig deep. And let the chips fall where they may, basically. So we've already established that. But being that this is our first podcast, maybe we can talk about us just a little, because we're now reaching a new audience with this podcast. And who's Sam and Kenny, and why us? we're not a couple, you know. So where did our bromance come from? I feel very comfortable with you, and people see it, you know, and you with me. Somehow we met each other, and there was a kindred spirit that connected, and I don't know why. So maybe you can maybe share on that. I just know that I admire you because you think in a lot of ways similarly to how I think, but you think differently, and that's what I learned from. It's your analysis that tend to be more methodical. You tend to think more like a consultant, and I'm the guy. You know, I think off the seat of my pants. You know, so and I like that because I do appreciate the way that you analyze things. So how did this come about, this partnership that we have?
First of all, for anyone listening or watching this, I'm not paying Sam to say any of these nice things about me, but I can.
But has anyone said nice things about you without you paying? I'm just kidding.
No, I mean, to be honest, I think I came to Jungle Bay with my family, I think.
The original
Jungle Bay. I remember you walking all over the place and everybody was talking
like a mad fella.
Sam.
Yeah.
I remember you used to have that place where you could play the table tennis and so on.
Right.
And I found it kind of strange that you had the accommodation and you had to leave the accommodation to go to the central space to play table tennis and do Wi-Fi and everything. But it was very cool. And I think I met you there and you were hands-on with everybody, and it was quite interesting that you had this approach for tourism management, which was relationship based, based around you, your identity, or as they call it now, brand you. And I think we spoke for a while, and then when you were looking for a place for the next Jungle Bay, you contacted me.
Correct.
Because I had contact with the previous owner.
Right.
And I built a bridge, in other words, to be able to do that. And one of the things that I appreciated, I remember there was a guy who used to farm here from Soufriere. And I had to come here and sit down in the bush with him to tell him, you know, this guy, Sam Raphael, wants to buy this property, etc., etc.
But he was squatting. He was not the official owner.
Yes, and you know, and what I appreciated about it was that after, one of the things that we managed to negotiate is that his son would work on Jungle Bay, on the building of Jungle Bay, and that also when Jungle Bay is working, if he had produce, the guy had produce, that he would sell to Jungle Bay. And
we also paid him for the crops he had planted, even though we were not obligated to do that.
Exactly. And I thought that was nice, man. It just felt like you gave a damn. And that established to me that you had a level of compassion in the way that you dealt with people. So I didn't know anything about you other than that. I knew you had been overseas and so on. But I really didn't know your story, and I learned your story as we went along, because you don't talk about yourself and I don't talk about myself.
Right.
And we have very separate lives. So yeah, that's when I met you. It was through that avenue, and then there's the other part of it, is that someone purchases something, and if you work in realty or anything, and someone takes on something, you often don't see it completed. You know, people say, okay, I'm going to build a house, and it never happens. Or I'm going to do this, and it never happens. But this did happen. I came here for the opening. The launch, the breaking of ground. I know there was a lot of cynicism about it because of what has happened in the industry across the region, and we can talk about that. But you said what you were going to do, and you did what you said you were going to do. And that has a very powerful resonance to anyone in this country, because it's not as easy as it looks. And many people who say they're going to do certain things and it doesn't happen. So I gave you kudos for that. And the other thing was that I think it's very important for people to understand that you cross the political divide in everything that you do. You've mentioned it in passing, but you know, nearly all of the people who worked in terms of the consultative level, you know, the architect, etc., were people who were not aligned with, say, the government or anything like that, which for the the average person who's listening from outside the Caribbean might seem strange, but it is a thing that people vest themselves in
partisan politics. In Dominica.
But whilst you come on the radio station and you may show a particular meaning, your friendships and how you spend your money and how you deal with people and how you do business has nothing to do with that.
There's no room.
And to me,
I don't think there should be any space, any window for any partisanship in anything other than politics.
Yes.
Other than that, let's just do business and see who can provide the best service or whatever it is, or if you're working on a program to improve people's lives, politics shouldn't be involved in the discussion at all.
But there is a graduation to a cancel culture. And that cancel culture includes politics, because now what has happened is people don't say, well, you know what, I'm conservative and you're liberal, and we just agree to disagree and we'll have drinks, etc. No, people, and this is at every level, not just in Dominica, it's from the Caribbean.
Certainly in the US, I see it.
In the US, it's happening. In the UK, it's happened. People just don't fraternize with people that they feel are not part of their thought process. And that's a dangerous thing, because it creates these silos where no one can really communicate with each other.
But I think it limits you in what you can do. First of all, relationships, that's the key towards being able to do anything. I don't know anything that someone can do in today's world that they themselves alone will do. You need relationships at any level, whether it's the banking or the planning or just on the community level or suppliers, etc. And why limit your relationship to some kind of partisan whatever when that has nothing to do with what you need to achieve? And so I think that's a major part of the reason why I like to think I think this way. Also too, in reality, not just in Dominica, but I play golf, for instance, right? I'm a golfer. And many of my golfing buddies are Trump conservative, Trump Republicans. We often say, I don't want to discuss politics, let's just play. Because if we discuss politics, then it can degenerate. But what I find is people who sometimes have opposite viewpoints could be the most caring people to you personally. And I had some real life experience in this way. And when the original Jungle Bay got destroyed, damaged, some of the people that reached out the most, financially and otherwise, and came out strong in supporting me and the staff at Jungle Bay and helping and so on, were people whose politics I didn't align with at all. But, their heart is there. And so...
it's very difficult to get a balanced and measured view in small countries. Because whilst we speak in theory, in reality...
some people's their livelihood is vested in partisanship.
And also there's a comfort around it. You go to a party and nearly all of the people who may be there are aligned to one viewpoint. And it's, in some cases, it may not be even deliberate, but it's a gravitation that happens to eventually people say, I don't want this person there because Mr. talks a lot of nonsense. And I don't want to agitate this other friend of mine who doesn't like to hear this. And it becomes pervasive. It's not a right thing, but it's a thing. However, we do need to be able to have that discussion. And the reason we started this is because we saw it came from even before the 2019 elections. We saw the level of agitation. And in small countries, what differentiates the Caribbean in particular from countries like, or from regions like Africa, is that we've been always able to have peaceful dialogue.
Right.
Even when we have differences. In fact, the Caribbean is considered the last zone of peace in the world. Now think about people who say that we need to overthrow a government or we need to, get rid of these people. Often they're not thinking of the repercussions on what happens when you get rid of one person that is aligned to one party or aligned to a particular thought process. You build a culture where getting rid of people despite the process, becomes allowable. And that is something that has happened in Africa. And in Africa, it happened primarily because the Western powers were playing sides against each other. It didn't happen as some kind of organic exercise. Yes, long time ago, you would have tribal warfare. But after warfare, tribes sat within their demarcated areas and traded and were peaceful. This idea of Africa always being warlike or having wars or being in turmoil is not true. Like everywhere else, you've got turmoil. But if we look at Europe, for example, the two largest warfare events, the two world wars, happened in Europe, which we consider the most advanced, civilized group of people. So these
even today's conflict right now.
Yes, of course. So I think to me in particular, the reason for this is because I'm seeing a dangerous tendency for people to pretend they don't know a guy because his arguments or his leanings seem to be different from theirs. And when you start to pretend that you don't know someone, then you can be capable of doing some really terrible things to them.
So there are a couple of things that came to mind when you were talking. And one is there's a perceived area of grievance and then there's a real situation with this partisanship. And the lines get blurred, and in a situation like the one we have in Dominica where people have become permanent enemies of the government. I'm not talking political people. I'm talking about everyday people that are so immersed in the politics, even though it shouldn't affect their everyday life, it has become that. And they vest their future on the survival of a particular government or on the demise of a particular government. And so that when that's the demarcation, that's a very dangerous space. And this is the reality for some people. So if we can talk philosophically, and they may even agree with some of what we have to say, but in reality, their situation on the ground, they see it's a matter of resources, controlling resources, and they view especially people who feel on the outside, they view the fact that they're not doing well because of Kenny and Sam and other people who benefit from the existing government. And so this is, how it's really sad, because if, as you're suggesting, that is the thinking, and they want the government to change so that they can do better, that means they want it to change so that the people who they perceive as doing better have to do worse then, And it's sort of where you decided that it can't be head we win, tail we win, as politics should be. Politics should be, okay, I think this one is a better person, better team to manage our affairs. But if my team that I think is a better team is not the prevailing team to manage your affairs, and the other team is selected, we should also be able to do well.
Well, I'd like to think that, Sam, that between ourselves, people who know us know we don't have partisan bones in our body. Right. We may have thought processes and we may have stances we take on particular issues, but it's not like we say you need to punish this guy because he doesn't align himself with what I think.
Well, you and I don't think that, but there are persons that either think that or that are thought to think that.
Yeah, true. Yeah, and the thing is, you can't change established practice in a couple of radio shows or podcasts.
Or overnight, right.
But you can talk about it, and you can get to a point where people can understand that, it's actually ridiculous on every side of the equation. Because if you have really good people who are able to make a contribution to the country,
right,
then they should be able to make a contribution at any time.
Period.
The problem that emanates from this, and you see this in American politics in particular, is that in American politics, which is different from British politics, which has been passed on to us, in American politics, you tend to find that the political establishment changes wholesale. So,
But it's structurally designed.
It's structurally designed like that. So Trump's people come, Trump's people go. You know, Biden's people comes.
Well, that's
Biden's
because,
people go.
as one of our program, I think Senator David Jones pointed out, that's the Republican system versus a parliamentary system.
Yes, correct.
And the Republican system is where the executive is separate from the legislature.
Correct.
And the executive is the manager and administrator.
Correct.
And they are temporary. That they come and go. But then in the British system, where the parliament, the legislature, is also the executive branch, and then you have the civil service that's part of that, I don't want to say the red tape, part of the bureaucracy, that remains. And so you have permanent secretaries that transcend that political. In the US, you have directors of agencies. They go like that. When your team loses, you're Republican and the Democrats come in, all the executive positions, if you're governor or whatever it is, or in the city, you're a mayor, all your supporters, all the people that work with you, they automatically fired.
Yeah.
And the other person bring in their team to implement.
Yeah.
That's not what the British left here.
Correct.
And so in some ways that is more efficient because you know they're with you and they know no one is around to undermine what it is that you're doing. Whereas in the British system, you have people that can, not really be with you, they can undermine, but you're stuck with them because they're part of the permanent. So they have their pros and cons.
They have established tenure.
Yeah.
We've discussed a host of topics over the last 6 months. What would you say has been your favorite show or your favorite topic?
That is interesting. A few of them. I like Cozier Frederick from the Kananago territory.
Yes.
I thought he acquitted himself well.
Yeah.
I didn't know him that well personally. I mean, I just saw him. He did it, but he came off really as a deep person. He's really committed. To me, he's not much of a politician. When I think of a politician, he's not out there playing politics. He is really committed to the Kananago people and to the development of Dominica, and he has some deep spiritual energy that I particularly like. So he's probably one of my favorite, but I like them all. We hosted a number of persons. Sometimes I like some of the callers,
Yeah.
I'll miss some of the callers, even though they weren't, sometimes they weren't very nice to us, but that doesn't matter. The fact that they were there, they listened to us, and then I saw, I don't want to say breaking down, but kind of relationship building. So they went away from the constant, anger all the time to where you could even tell their vibe that they were now beginning to find some kind of common ground.
Yeah, and sometimes you find someone stopped me outside of the supermarket last week to tell me how she was disappointed, how we did not, we repeated the no law, no constitution. He said, no law, not even the constitution can prevent me from being nominated. And this holds for him or anyone who's being accused of a breach without actually having any charge to make that could stop him from entering the nomination process. He was factual about it. It's just that on a political platform,
it don't sound good.
It don't sound good. And those are the kind of things that happens. People, there's something one day we will maybe be able to talk about it that happened with you in your political life, that happens around that same matter, and another person that
we can talk. Yes,
we can talk about it because it's very important to put context to these things and to let people understand that there's politics and there's politics. It's just like the whole CBI thing. There's a lot of laborites. I know one particular laborite who was angry at me from pointing out that I thought when they came up with the Oti La Jala thing, I thought it was a great campaign.
Yes, it was very catchy.
I thought it was very, very catchy. I knew it was a campaign.
Right.
I didn't see any substance.
I didn't think it had any merit.
No.
But in the partisan political discourse, make America great again. What is that?
Exactly.
But it's catchy and it sounds good to a partisan crowd, and so that
and it has carried on. It went from 1.2 billion to 4 point something billion. But in reality, if you examine it from a logical point of view, it doesn't make any sense. However, it has become part of the political landscape to the point where people will argue with you that this is an issue. But we spoke about it, and I enjoyed the fact that we brought it to the fore and explained the reasons why we did not think it was logical. And that was good. The other thing is, obviously, because we don't have a hosted show, as you can see, Tanya is not with us. We brought on Tanya to host the show for us on radio. So on the podcast format, she's not here. There's the possibility in the future, if it's a topic that she's comfortable with, and she
has her topics.
She has her topics. That she will come on board. And I would like to say thank you to Tanya, because she brought her everyday girl.
But she was your invitee, and like I said, I didn't know her before you introduced me on the program. And as a young woman, I got to know her, and she has a big heart. I
thought Tanya, I got to learn about Tanya from a late night show she used to have called Airgasm, which I thought was revolutionary for Dominica and even the Caribbean, because it was as liberal and as provocative as you can go. It was basically talk about sex and relationship issues, and it used to be on very late at night. And I think her show got targeted by people who would rather not have these issues discussed. And I thought it had a lot of potential. And I liked how she used to host and how provocative she could be. Because sometimes you need someone to play off people versus, the different hosts, etc. And that's where I got in touch with her and asked her if she'd like to come on, because I thought her voice, especially, she's got a good radio voice.
But not on the politics thing, but I've had an opportunity to talk to her about some of her other things outside of the radio, in development of women, which I think I'm particularly, impressed with respect to that, and some other issues that she's, youth, and even now she's working with me on something with the other young people from her area too. And I think those things are all good, because sometimes we just see each other on the surface, but deep down I think we have a lot more to offer. We all do, and we all have our backstories. And so I think it is important that our human side is exposed, so people can understand that we are more than just caricatures. Defending Skerrit, or he don't like UWP, or he don't like Labour. We're a lot more than that, and we all have, I think, meaningful contributions to make. So that's good.
And I think with this new format as well, what you're going to find is you're going to have a lot more people coming forward and hearing their authentic voice. Some people are still intimidated by the idea of coming into the studio or being live.
And taking on the live calls. Some people, for me, I don't care, because you say something bad about me, it is irrelevant. We're dealing on something, and let's go down there. But it's not everybody. Dominicans don't like people to abuse them. Dominicans don't like, they see...
They're afraid of criticism.
They don't well, especially when the criticism is unfair personal, or people who don't even know you can just say things. So people are discouraged from...
Well, we have a culture of people always talking behind other people's backs, this is not something... sorry to say it, guys, Caribbean culture, the Picon culture, is very live, both amongst people who don't like each other and amongst people who are friends with each other. And often what you have is that people get weary because they see what happens to Sam, they see what happens to Kenny. People call me and say, "Boy, they said that about you." And I said, "True? Yeah, okay, cool." Not because I don't care, but when you reach a particular stage in your life, to sit back and worry about what people think of you it really doesn't matter.
Well, it amounts to almost you really, because if especially if you know that what they're saying
is
nonsense. You're not going to spend your time or energy, and they don't know you, or they don't whatever, so you don't let that bother you. And I think that's good. Maybe we can talk about some current issues though, Kenny, since we
have the Domlec issue.
Right.
That is something that is present.
So let's touch on that, and
I know you have a declaration of...
I was one of those persons that was recently appointed by the government to the Domlec board. So I cannot discuss deliberations that happen by virtue of my board inclusion. And that goes not just with Dominic Board, that's any board that you're in. I can't go in there and take the board secrets and discuss it, but I will certainly defend Dominic as a board member. I'm not going to sit and have a discussion instead about Dominic and know that the information is incorrect. That would be a dereliction of duty. And I would clarify things that's publicly disclosed. So the Prime Minister made some disclosures in Parliament yesterday with respect to the acquisition of Dominic. So I'm happy to discuss things at that level, or things that have been discussed in the public domain.
So people have asked, I've seen people asking, why is it that it was not announced before? Why was it kept back?
That is not a Dominic issue. The government bought a company from Emera, a holding company that held 52%, a majority interest in Dominic. So that's that transaction. And they paid an agreed amount of $5 million US dollars for that. So basically, the government reacquired Dominic for $5 million US dollars. That money is acquired in terms. I didn't hear the Parliament yesterday, so again, I can't go into too much details on that. So at least that we have established that it was purchased for less than the asking per share price. So why wasn't it disclosed before going to Parliament? I don't think there's any reason in my mind why, other than the Prime Minister decided to let the public know at a certain time, and it was during Parliament. It's not that long ago that the transaction occurred. There may have been some non-disclosure matters between the buyer and the seller. We can speculate on that. So I don't know. That would be a question that one would have to ask the Prime Minister, because it's the government. It wasn't Dominic to disclose that. It was the government's to disclose that, basically on the political level, the Prime Minister's office, and he chose not to. So that someone can take that up with the Prime Minister and ask him that. But the reality is, it has been disclosed, so that is out. That's dealt with, and I think the question or the suggestion that the government bought Dominic for far more than it was worth is absolutely not correct. That we can establish. Also, there are other issues with respect to the acquisition, the need to acquire. It's not just a nationalistic, well, we own back Dominic, so that is not the rationale for it. The rationale is very real from a standpoint of energy security. In that, we see what happens with these storms coming through, and people don't realize how close to being in serious trouble we were as a country, with our power company being privately held, and how close to insolvency the company could have been. They could have been a walkaway situation. Correct. Dominicans need to be grateful to Emera for not walking away, because in other places, the company may say it's more trouble than it's worth. We will spend far more in this than we'll ever recover in the short term or the medium term. Let me get out of here. They didn't. But the risk was still there. So it was important to get the sovereign behind it, the state itself. And the state, we know Dominica cannot exist without electricity. So if something, regardless how bad something happens to our electrical company now, the government is going to stand there and they're going to get it fixed. And also, it's no longer in majority owned by a private company. So the government can then appeal to international agencies to get relief, to redevelop Dominic if, God forbid, we have to go through that path. Again, they couldn't before because it was a private company. So we have a lot of reasons why it's necessary. The government would ultimately have had to negotiate something with Emera, and I don't know where or how it would happen, but we all know the government is busy building power generation through geothermal, and that's huge investments they're working on developing a plant. So the plant is going to generate all this energy, but how does the energy get from the plant to you, the consumer? Through the distribution system. But that distribution system is not owned by the government. And the government cannot deliver power to you on someone else's line. So the government now, it's a best case scenario. So now the government now, they have a controlling interest in the company that owns the lines and distribution. So it puts them in a good position so that there can be some favorable outcome to the benefit of the public. So you've got the generation, which is one part, you got the distribution, which is another, and then you have the household accounts and the business accounts and stuff. So now it's all under one roof with the acquisition of the majority interest in Domlec. So those are all things that maybe you won't hear the discussions on those, but those were all very important parts of the discussion and very important parts of the rationale for the government's reinvestment in Domlec. It was sold at a different time. I don't necessarily think it's fair to blame the government of the day when it was sold. They looked at it. I wasn't sitting at the table. I wasn't in cabinet. I wasn't a consultant then. I don't know what pressure they had, but they felt compelled to sell and they sold. That was done.
I don't think it's fair to link the two.
And now times are different. There's an opportunity now. The government acquired, and so I think it's Dominica's benefit, and I think
it's a case of national security. You mentioned it's a case of national security. You also mentioned, and it's very, very true, how lucky we were, because right after Maria, when the cost of rebuild versus the projected return on investment could have prompted Emirates to say thank you, but no thank you, and walk away.
We're out of here. Yeah.
They, in essence, rebuilt an infrastructure that you could argue were far more to them, even if they have debt loads, because the debt loads are not unsustainable.
Correct.
What they're walking away more importantly from is the risk of future events.
Correct.
That's what they're really walking away from. And the government taking ownership of the risk is the best thing, only because we have only one utility company.
Yeah.
And so it's not even a thing to support. It's a good move. Now there's another part to this, which is that partisan side that says, oh, that electricity now can be served cheaper to the general public. It doesn't stop operating as a business, right, because government is the majority shareholder.
You still have private shareholders that expect a return on their investment.
Exactly.
And Domlec need to continue to operate as a business.
Correct.
And so it's not as if the government owns the utility. The government has a majority interest in a private company that operates the utilities, but it's not as if it's a government agency. Domlec is not a government
and
agency.
there are a lot of smart people working inside of Domlec who are delivering and developing the infrastructure.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Kenny, because when we compare, and I live in other islands in the Caribbean, I can see for small islands the level of reliable service, and it's not just because I'm on the board, nothing to do with any connection with Domlec. I can tell you that Domlec is an efficient power company, considering small island states. And you can look at outages in other islands. I would challenge anyone to measure the other islands to Dominica's power and to Domlec. Domlec is strong. It's a strong company. Even cost-wise, we have a very small economy, and economies of scale is working against Domlec. But I would say efficiency-wise, the company is very efficient. It's got certainly the managing director and the top team. I don't think you can get a better team than what we have in Dominic, and it's indigenous Dominicans for the most part, So I think that Domlec is something that all of us should be proud to rally around. Our power prices, as we would like. Listen, I operate a hotel here and I pay tens of thousands of dollars every month to the power company. I don't like it. It's gone up significantly. The price is based on the fluctuation is based on the world price of fuel. Domlec doesn't have anything to do with that. And it's really disingenuous to suggest that somehow because the government now, they have an interest in a majority shareholding interest, they can affect the cost of power. They can't, because it's all driven by fuel prices. And Dominica doesn't produce fuel. The government doesn't doesn't have a fuel well and a refinery to sell fuel to Domlec. It's purchased on the world market.
Yeah.
And so people need to appreciate that. What we should hope to see, what we should expect to see, is when we move towards more renewable, especially with the development of this geothermal plant, that now the production side is going to end up being more efficient, because we then won't depend on fuel from someplace else. And at that point, with the efficiencies in management and operation, the public should then expect to see a reduction in the costs of fuel. And a developing country like Dominica, we need to continue to find ways to reduce the cost of fuel, because that speaks not just to how the consumers are affected, but also the ability to attract direct foreign investment. If you're trying to set up a factory, the cost of electricity is a major consideration as to whether or not you will come to the country and develop a plant here or not, or any other investment.
I think, Sam, what this also does is that it squarely puts the microscope on geothermal and geothermal development. Because right now it's not just sitting alongside of Domlec in a parallel stream. Right now it is the possible path away from fossil fuels. And now with control over much of the infrastructure, not just for production, but also for distribution, the government has to deliver.
That's correct.
And that's just the long and short of it. And so now I think it's now incumbent on the government to communicate more to the general public about what happens during the whole geothermal development. I mean, now they've moved the capacity of the initial plant from I believe 5 megawatts to either 7 or 10 megawatts. Dominica's capacity right now in terms of usage is around 16 megawatts, which is really small. However, it's a catch-22. If you have cleaner energy and cheaper energy, then more people will consider ventures that take advantage of energy costs being low. And so that's very, very important. But we have a conspiracy culture. And one of the things that we want to deal with, and it's not just Dominica, because this is going to go out not just to Dominicans, but to the world. And we will be talking to policymakers in other islands. So I think it's very important to deal with the whole conspiracy culture that deals with everything from politics to business when we discuss it.
Not just a conspiracy culture. The reason why I said I would like to match Domlec's record with that of any other island in the Caribbean is that we live on an island and we only see what's happening on the island that we live in. And we don't compare it with the others.
Well, worse still, you say that. Actually, we skip over all of the islands and we see the United States and the UK and Canada and France, and we compare ourselves to them, which is kind of crazy. But the guy next door in St. Lucia and Antigua,
that's having their troubles. We kind of think it's only in Dominica bad, things are so bad, or it's only in Dominica. When we measure against our neighbors, we see, in fact, there's room for improvement in many things in Dominica. I would never ever suggest there isn't. It's all opportunities as I see it. It's not opportunities to continue to improve. But I would think, honestly, we don't give ourselves enough credit when we do things right. And there's so many positive efforts that are being made here that are not really being recognized, because we've decided for some reason it's not perfect in some ways, but we don't look at some of the real challenges that the small developing island state have to deal with, and deal with that rationally.
So Sam, when we first started this program, we started it on the CBI track, because there were lots of rumors,
people actually thought it was a CBI program.
Yes, they thought it was, and people also think that the government are paying us, or the Labour Party is paying us, and that we're some kind of managed psy-op exercise. Oh God.
Clarify that they're not paying us, because some people, unless you say verbatim, we are not being paid by the government.
We're not
or
being
any
paid by the
political
government or any
entity,
political entity.
or affiliated with them, or
with any-
coordinate anything with them, or get authorization from any prime minister or anyone to do the program. We are two independent business people that have taken this on as a project.
And we didn't take it on as a business,
Yes.
which is unfortunate, because now we're starting to get into the frame of mind that we have something here that can actually generate more than just talking points. But really,
so how we've done it is, I had to pay 1 month, Kenny had to pay 1 month for the airtime and so on, and that's basically how we've done it.
Yeah.
We've paid out of our own pockets because it's been 6 months, a very interesting 6 months, and I learned a lot from it. But you said we started on the CBI track. I'll let you continue.
yeah, and I learned a lot about people too. Huh? You learn about people both close to you and far away from you, from things that happen in the public domain and how their perceptions can be affected by what people say. But yeah, we started on the CBI tracks primarily because we work in CBI. And for those people who don't know, those listeners who don't know, the CBI stands for Citizenship by Investment, which is the industry that comes from the investment made by people in different jurisdictions, different countries: Cyprus, Malta, Portugal, Greece, Dominica, St. Kitts, St. Lucia, Grenada, Antigua, from which results in citizenship as an incentive for those people who invest in either real estate or in donation options in each of those jurisdictions. So because we're part of it, we felt it was necessary to stop all of the innuendo and talk, which, I mean, most of it, if I would say 99% of the ill-informed talk is not just negative, it's malicious, and it also projects the viewpoint that, people in this industry are simply just walking around as millionaires, making money all over the place. It is not so. It's an industry like everything else. They're winners, they're losers, and it's in the middle. That's where most people sit, where if you get 2 free clients a year, you're lucky.
And part of it is, as practitioners, it was a little frustrating, hearing this negative, night and day that's not based on reality, but it wasn't answered. So no one was answering that, no one was responding. And so a large part of the rationale why you and I decided to say, listen, if we're banana farmers and banana farmers getting hit night and day, taking blows, and banana farmers know that that's not true. Somebody, a banana farmer, would have to step up and say, hey, no, that's not how it is. Or if it's in tourism, which is my line of work, I would have to say, no, guys, you're doing damage to tourism that's bringing benefits, to even the farmers or to the people that fish, and we try to put it in context. So it's the same thing that we did with the CBI, in that when we first came out, people thought it was just based on CBI, because it was very important for us to clarify what the CBI program was and what are the benefits that the people of the island were deriving that they may not even associate with the CBI program, and some of the negative myths about, this perception of, all this criminal activity and unverified granting of citizenship through, or I say unverified, but people getting citizenship without going through due diligence. And there were all of these very awful rumors about the sale of passports, and we clarified that passports isn't for sale, that there's a process to get citizenship, and so it was very important and timely for us to do that. And I dare say, to some extent, I even hear in the conversation, and words matter, that in some ways the conversation has shifted and people have gotten wiser in terms of what the CBI program was as a result. I didn't mean to jump into your
I agree. Everything you said is spot on. I mean, the thing about it is that there is a discussion that can be had and should be had about these citizenship programs, even from the political angle. And the discussion, I think, can and should be happening is from an opposition government point of view in each of these islands, is how they would run it better, how they would do it better. Or if they want to make a philosophical argument to say, we believe that the program should be shut down because we believe we can do this or that better to be able to bolster the economy. But that's not what's happening. And it's in Dominica, it's in Antigua, it's in Lucia, in each of these islands. What happens is the argument is made that the program is crooked, is run by crooks and criminals, and all kinds of nefarious things are happening, and you know the government should be toughed out of power because of this. Now what happens is that it creates a difficult problem for people, because even if you want to talk down the rumors, sometimes what happens is that you have people who don't want to be seen to be defending the government by proxy. Well, I don't necessarily care what people think about that, because if the government changes today, the industry will remain.
Correct.
And people need to understand that. It has not, Dominica has had 3 political parties since the citizenship program started, and they've all run it. And they've all said things about it. You know, so if you get past the politics, you realize it's going to be there.
And some of the most successful players have been part of the industry for just about all 3 of those governments.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
you know,
I mean, we are virgins
professionals,
in the whole thing. You're not, I am pretty much. But the reason why I got involved in having that discussion is because what tends to happen now is, because of how media and communications works, you're not just talking to an audience in Dominica. What you have basically is a message that's resonating throughout, to the point where people that you know, that people who even know better, come and repeat some of these same things to you. And then when you examine it and when you debate it, then there's nothing there. So I felt, I can tell you, I felt that some of the personal aspects of it, and I'll give you one, and I made that point when this whole 1.2 billion, etc., came up. At the time that it started, beyond the political noise, there were accusations made about the then financial secretary, that as the top public servant in the Ministry of Finance, that she was complicit in theft of the nation's resources.
For lack of a better word.
Correct. I mean, that's what was said. And her name was called, and she was asked to come into the public domain to basically explain what is happening, which is quite interesting, because you accuse someone of something and then you ask them to come and explain their position. Well, less than 6 months later, when she retired, the IMF snapped her up to work on their Caribbean desk. Now, both sides can be claimed to be accused of this. But it's interesting to me that people will say, for example, that Thomson Fontaine is validated as a professional because the South of Sudan employs him through the UN as an advisor to their peace process. And Thomson Fontaine is a professional.
Correct.
He is, and he should be respected as such, which is true. Yet, they somehow machinate in their minds that a financial secretary who gets snapped up by the IMF to head their Caribbean desk and to work with Dominica as well as the Eastern Caribbean islands is part of the biggest scandal, so to speak, to effectively steal money from the state. It doesn't make any logical sense.
She's even more validated in that, except if the whole international community, World Bank, the IMF, the US government, all these are somehow complicit in a little Dominican craziness, it makes absolutely no sense.
Yes. But
And
you see,
if you think that all of them are, then that makes no sense. So in reality, I mean, that's clear, but then it's like an attack is made and then they moved on.
Yeah.
You damage someone's character,
Yeah.
and you just move on.
Yeah,
To
yeah.
damage someone else's character,
Yeah.
to move on. And this is so what we see happening. One of the things that most concerned me, though, late last year when I felt it was necessary, and again we opened this thing up, where we started discussing public, is I'm in tourism. I disclose that. And we need air access in Dominica. The flights, American airline direct flights started in December 8th. I remember the date because I flew into Miami just so I can get on board on that flight to really, to test it out because I knew it was so important. And so far I've been on that flight 4 times, and the 5th time in June. because my goodness, they've gone now to a daily flight instead of 2-day flights. The importance of air access to Dominica. So the airport is being constructed under the Citizenship by Investment Program. And I was just afraid that there would be negative activity that would not be helpful in the development of the airport as a result of all of these wild and salacious accusations. And I just thought it was important to say, wait a second, guys, put the brakes on this. You know, we need this airport for national development, not for the Labour Party or for the Roosevelt Skerritt regime, but for the future, for the children and grandchildren and, you know, the descendants down the line.
But Sam, you know better than that, because the airport is seen as part of the politics of the country, and it's.
But that is so, Kenny.
Yeah, but
that is so sad.
It's sad because you can look above it being in your position.
But anyone in any position, just a Dominican living abroad needing to come home because their mother's ill or because something or the other, or any future development, anyone that's concerned about anything about the future of Dominica,
that's not only politics.
It's outside. That has to be a sacred thing. We got to get that airport built because every successive government have stated and have made clear that the priority is development of the airport.
That is not how it is perceived, and you know, unfortunately, what has happened is that it has become something of a holy grail to stop a political party, so to speak, from gaining from the largesse of public opinion, from being the first to build an international airport. That's how politics really works in Dominica, and that's how it works in
I can understand that for other issues, Kenny, but an airport is sacred.
Well, it isn't sacred to many of the people that you think it would be sacred for. It just doesn't work like that. I mean, look at how many arguments that are proxying. Look at the resistance from a segment to Patricia Scotland's renewal of her Secretary General bid.
Right, yes.
You know, many Dominicans are backing a Jamaican against Patricia Scotland. Why? Because it's seen as a proxy battle to Prime Minister Skerritt. So if she loses,
she made a comment that hurt some people's feelings.
Even without the comment, I mean, come on. Even without the comment, it is seen that a defeat for her is a defeat for the Prime Minister.
But if people realize, even, you know, because of her, I'm following this Commonwealth thing. You know, she's done a lot. She's done a lot since she's been in improving systems and making the whole Commonwealth more relevant, that whoever succeeds her will have a much easier time. A lot of countries have benefited. The Commonwealth as on its own have been stronger, and with technology and things are much more relevant today. I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't followed her. So not just for Dominica, but for the Commonwealth, she's been an asset. You know, she's really made some fundamental changes that's been very positive. And as a Dominican, I am proud that we have a Dominican in that position. However, I guess you're correct in that I do.
And it's not just here. I mean, she is a Labour peer in the UK, and so resistance from the Conservatives.
So the Conservative government, but you can understand from their perspective, they don't want a former Labour MP and minister. I think she was the Attorney General of the UK. What was the position?
Yeah, she was the Attorney General, the first black woman to become an Attorney General.
I mean, somebody like that, you're not gonna hold up and celebrate that woman because it's like Barack Obama. You know, you hear a black person say, "I hate Barack Obama." You don't understand history, because the importance of that person breaking that barrier is so important, and you will let a little silly island.
But I heard a Jamaican commentator. You know, I have some very good Jamaican friends. I heard a Jamaican commentator make the point that Jamaica should have turned down the role, not just because of the Caribbean unity, but because Jamaicans make up the large amount of the Windrush people who have been so slighted and poorly treated by the British government, with no recompense to them or no change in the status, and Jamaicans remain the single most deported, highest group of deportees from the United Kingdom. And there you have the Conservative Prime Minister, without announcing any change in policy towards them, coming to Jamaica to essentially do the their work for them in trying to unseat
a fellow
Caribbean person. And so it's quite interesting. But it comes back down to the narrow politics again. And when you say narrow, and I say narrow, for those people who listen to this, I'm not saying that you're in any way unjustified for having your stance. I'm just saying that at the end of the day, you do it this way, the next guy does it that way, it never ends. It just doesn't end. And it'll be interesting to see what happens at the elections in the end of June.
In Rwanda on the 25th, I think.
Yes, correct. So that is going to be an interesting sidebar. In terms of. But
I can say this: Patricia Scotland, I've gotten to know her since then, and she loves Dominica. Huh? There's no two ways about it. I think the Trinidad Prime Minister suggested that she's an English person and not a Caribbean person, and that was his justification, for which I just think is bizarre, because she was born in Dominica and left at a very young age. Her parents took her, educated her, and said, how more Caribbean can that be, And to hear the woman and to see where her love and commitment is in these Caribbean islands. So I know she said that she would like to come, especially to Dominica. She's passionate about Dominica, and she wants to come to Dominica, win, lose or draw, one way or the other, and she loves the country. And I think that is the testimony right there.
Yeah, it's something positive, because she as well is someone to aspire to. Her achievements read like
for a young girl to have these female models, young Caribbean Dominican girl, to see you can be the next, Baroness Scotland, or you can achieve anything at any level.
Yeah,
that's huge.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways you could almost say, Jamaicans are proud of the fact that Kamala Harris ascended to the vice president. But the Patricia Scotland has a stronger link with Dominica than VP Harris has with Jamaica.
Absolutely.
So it's quite interesting. In terms of some of the future things that we're going to be speaking about, give the listeners a clue as to some of the things that are going to be discussed coming forward.
Certainly at a local level, I'd like to talk about the environment, because that's neglected. In terms of the physical dumping of garbage that we see on the side of the roads, and this is not a political play one way or the other. This is all of us Dominicans to really highlight this neglect we have for the environment and how important the environment is to the future, economic and otherwise, health-wise, of the island. And I'd really like to have a sustained discussion, because I think that's huge for the future development of Dominica. Even issues of noise abatement. When we were shut down for COVID, a lot of the noise in the villages went down, but we have this blaring all night with people having these noisy things, where older people and people can't think or sleep because of noise pollution, and you have a noise abatement act and the adherence to that. I'd like us to talk about that, because if we have a law on the books, we need to stick to that, and it needs to be adhered to. Friend or foe, it doesn't matter. There should be equality under the law at all times, as the rule of law, and equality under the law at all times. So if people are dumping, whether it's your friend or your foe or supporting this or that, they should not be able to do that. If there's noise, they should not be able to do that. Even things like planning. We have situations, our resources of our rivers and our waterfalls and so on, it's beautiful, we talk about that, we'd like to boast about that, but what about putting things into place to ensure that we protect those things? And this is where I think the future of the island will require us being vigilant, the next generation being really committed and vigilant, and not making excuses or not allowing, not letting this be partisan.
The activism, ecological
activism. We all need to, because there's nobody out there that's going to do. We have to stand up and say no. We cannot have things destroy our rivers. We can't build in certain places because it's unsafe to build there. We saw. I think
people getting confident. There was a situation recently, where you had to step in
Yeah.
because of dumping.
Yeah. And create some stir.
Create a stir for something to happen.
Yeah.
People have to be able to separate themselves from the political argument. But at the same time, people also have to separate the political argument from that as well. Because what tends to happen is also people, you get an activist movement to say, okay, there's dumping in the river. And then suddenly it becomes part of the let's remove the government cry.
Right.
And what happens is that then the government then tightens up and treats it as a partisan exercise rather than treating it as it should, as a national ecological exercise.
Our environment has to be sacred to all of us.
Yeah.
It's something that we inherited and we are obligated to hand it over better than we got it to the next generation.
Yeah.
And we need to be very serious about that. And this is something that I would like to see us, for me, that's probably the most important topic as far as I'm concerned for us going forward. Youth entrepreneurship is another one also.
I think the cost of living is another thing. I think that has come up quite a bit. Not just here. I mean, we note that prices that go up often never come down, even when the cost of doing business goes down. Now, there's a whole heap of things that goes into that. I mean, you have the wage levels, because as wage levels go up, there's the cost of business for the businesses go up, and so they raise their prices often to meet that cost of doing business. Now with the shipping prices haven't gone up because of fuel, etc. Commodity prices are going up insane, and that's an ongoing issue that we'd like to discuss. I know for sure. I know we're going to have, as I said, some really interesting guests.
What about agriculture, Kenny? Because I mean, agriculture is a buzz word now. We're hearing more about it than we're seeing. I'm just, being honest with that. In terms of, we talking about the airport, the direct flights, and we're seeing some tangible things in tourism. I'm happy for that, and this needs to continue. But on the agriculture side, I'm not seeing. I don't know if you're seeing it. I'm not seeing the type of activity that I think we should expect, in the type of delivery that we should expect with respect to agriculture.
I have to give the minister kudos for one thing, at least in his constituency. He's doing a lot with youth in agriculture. He constantly posts about that directly, and he boasts about it, which is good. The other thing which has been a major issue for farmers that I know that they've been just arguing about and quarreling about, rightly so, is the access to their farms.
Access roads, yes.
However, that is a very, very difficult exercise because every time you have a disaster, roads get eroded and then you have to go through the same thing again, and it's like, what do you pick first?
But I think we can do more.
But we can do a lot more.
I think we can do more, and that is where we need to say, you don't have to be opposition to say we can do more. You to say honestly, we can do more. Yes. I support, and I would support whatever the government is doing, but it's like in my business, I don't look around my business and say, oh, we're doing great. People have said good things about Jungle Bay, so I'm happy. No, every day I have to go into the office and tell the staff and tell my folks, hey guys, we can do better than this. Sure, we get some positive reviews, but this is an area we can improve. That's an area, and I think this is the mindset that we need to have as Dominicans. Because we say we can do better, that doesn't mean that I'm opposed to.
Even the work that's going on right now with feeder roads, it'll be interesting to get feedback on how effective that work has been.
Correct.
Because that's the other thing.
From the farmers themselves. Yeah,
because, you hear about these projects, but you never really get the next stage of it is, how did it really go? How did it turn out? And so that's very, very important. The other thing is that I have a different view to agriculture. I'm not the most nuanced guy in agriculture, but I can tell you that my thought process is that agriculture should first and foremost be seen as a national security issue, food security. Because we have a long way to go before we can create proper production lines and quality standards for export. And people underestimate the value of what the banana industry and the management from yeast all the way down did as a monocrop, because it forced people to concentrate on standards. It forced them to not even worry about getting their stuff to the packing shed. You got it there, it was just taken care of. But now the farmer has to do much, much more. And so therefore getting the standards up is going to be crucial, but also your business, tourism. If the hotel industry in Dominica continues to develop, I know Tranquility Beach is coming nicely, Anichi is on its way. Kempinski is already open, you're already open, and there's a couple other new developments.
Certainly a lot of work in Secret Bay and Fort Young, coming back on stream, and we've got some others that are close.
Now, if you can get these hotels to purchase the majority of their production locally, that's a win. Now the thing is, even when these establishments want to buy locally,
it's not available.
Often it's not available, or the quality is not sufficient.
Even to, I heard the woman that is largely responsible for selling bananas in Antigua, Dominican bananas, and she had a robust market, have a difficulty getting bananas from Dominica. So that tells me that there's a tremendous opportunity that's sitting there, and that somehow we have to find a way to make that work and stop the talk. Let's just find a way to do it and make that work.
Yep, that's great. I'm looking forward to, I think, do we name our first guest? Or we wait?
No, so next week, Tuesday, we'll be back on with our first guest, and it will be an interesting change in format, Kenny. I am looking forward, again, like I say, I'm in for the ride, so I don't know, I'm following your lead. You're the smart one out of the two of us.
No, I wouldn't call myself smart at all. Being on this is not one of the smartest moves I've ever made. But you know what? I like to watch other podcasts. I watch Draymond Green, who is the Golden State Warrior. I'm a Boston Celtic fan, but he has a really good podcast. And one of the things that he does is he speaks his mind. And I think a lot of Dominicans are caught in this whole thing where they want to stay in a little corner somewhere and whisper about something and say something. And sometimes you get a chance, like we do, to say things that other people are thinking, but they don't get a chance to say it. Even within their own circles, for being denounced for supporting one side or the other. And that's very, very important, because for everything that there is out there, there's another side to the story.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're trying to present. And I know that the people who listen in, both to see us fall flat on our face,
for whatever,
or to enjoy the discourse between us, they're going to get more of this. And I can tell you there's going to be some really significant people coming on board. And you'll get to hear less of us and more of them.
Dominicans in the diaspora are making huge things happen. And we need to highlight them. And like, you lived away and you came back.
But you lived away.
I lived away, I came back. What does that say? There are lots of Dominicans out there that we need to get back here to have them contribute to development of the country. And we need to, I think that's our biggest asset.
And please, I take it a bit more extreme. As you know, I'm involved with the entrepreneur visa, which is almost on its way. And I have a slightly different tack when it comes to the development of Dominica. I've said it in the past. I've said it, my inspiration at the time many years ago was the Grenadian economist Michael Julian. I am not worried about who develops Dominica. I'm worried about their commitment to Dominica. Because if someone comes and lives and moves to Dominica and consumes and grows their family here, buys products here, they're Dominican.
Correct.
And in the same way that Dominicans go abroad to the UK, to the US, and vest themselves in these cultures, develop American accents, get British accents, and build their families there and contribute to those economies, and will feel insulted if someone tells them you do not belong here.
That's who I'm talking about, but certainly everyone that is committed to developing Dominica in a sustainable way, we need to get them.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. I know that. I just feel that we are closely getting into MAGA territory. And
make Dominica great again.
Yeah. And I want to make a last point. I always make it. In the 1980s, when our GDP growth in 1988 was the highest that we've ever had, during the 1980s, we had between 20 to 25,000 people left Dominica. And I often used to ask myself, why did these people leave? And then one day I was talking to someone from the State Department actually, and his answer was so simple and so true. He said because
The
they
US
could.
made it easier.
Yes, they just made it easier because at the time Eugenia Charles had a very good relationship with the United States post the Grenada.
It's going to happen again, Kenny, because you know what? The United States, they need productive people. Right now, they need truck drivers. Every day you listen to the United States, they need to fill 15 million jobs. And the Caribbean Dominicans are English speaking. So we are competing with the United States jurisdiction for our people. So we need to make sure that we help to improve the enabling environment for them to do well, so that we can keep them and even attract others, whether they are Dominican by birth, Dominican by heritage, or Dominican by the heart, to attract them here, because it's a competitive world out there.
Yep. Well, thank you guys. Thank you everyone.
Thank you as usual.
Yep. Had a ball of a time on this.